The United Nations look into alternative hosting options after Chile abruptly pulls out of hosting the climate summit. Thousands march in support of Bolivia's president as the government gears up for an international election audit, but without opposition candidate Carlos Mesa. And Catalan separatists take to the streets of Barcelona to protest against the visit of acting Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez. Hello and welcome to Telesur English. I am Estefania Bravo and this is from the Sun. In Chile, mass protests threatening to topple the Sebastián Piñera-led government have been met with police repression. Police have fired tear gas and water cannons at protesters as they march through the streets during the national strike. Demonstrations intensified shortly after President Piñera announced that the country will not host the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit in November and the COP25 conference in December. In response, protesters have declared they can cancel both summits, but they cannot cancel the movement. This as Chileans continue to demand a new constitution and an end to social and economic inequalities. Demonstrators have also made it clear that they want Piñera to resign. President Piñera's decision to withdraw Chile as the host of the UN Climate Summit has reportedly left organizers scrambling to find a venue for the major global event. UN Climate Change Executive Secretary Patricia Espinosa has issued a statement saying that alternative hosting options were being explored. Meanwhile, they are concerned that Chile's pulling out of the hosting this month's Asia-Pacific Summit could throw a wrench into trade talks between the United States and China.
This has been a very difficult decision, a decision that causes us a lot of pain. We have decided not to host the APEC summit that was scheduled to take place in November, nor the COP25 summit that was scheduled for the month of December. We deeply lament the problems and the inconveniences that this decision will have for APEC as well as for the COP25. But as president, I have always to put the problems and interests of Chileans, their needs and their hopes first.
Meanwhile, most Chileans have welcomed Piñera's decision to cancel both summits, saying that the country cannot play host to such large-scale events when half of its citizens do not earn enough to get out of poverty.
Cannot say that Chile is a worthy host when we aren't doing well, when we are in the middle of a social struggle that has been going on for decades.
For us, the cancellation of such important events that will bring people from all over the world together seems to be an appropriate step. It is a sign that we are succeeding with what we want, which was to finally be heard.
On Tuesday night, Brazil was rocked by a bombshell revelation that allegedly links the country's far-right president to the murder of Rio councilwoman Marielle Franco. According to media giant Rede Globo, one of the men responsible for Franco's murder visited the private complex where then Deputy Bolsonaro lived, just hours before committing the crime. He also registered as a visitor for Jair Bolsonaro, who was in Brasilia at the time. But the guard on duty has confirmed that someone inside Bolsonaro's apartment authorized the entry of Elicio Quiroz to the complex. Quiroz then headed to Ronnie Lesa's home, which is inside the same complex. Lesa is the man accused of firing the weapon that killed Marielle Franco and her driver Anderson Gomez, while Quiroz drove the vehicle used for the murder. Now, even though Lesa and Quiroz have already been charged with Franco's murder, many have continued to question who the real authors of the crime were. Soon after the revelations were made public, the far-right president lashed out on social media at the reports. In the video, Bolsonaro shouts and threatens Brazilian media, coming close to tears as he proclaims this will not stick, and claiming that Rede Globo is persecuting him, while also saying he could revoke their broadcasting license. A number of Brazilian lawmakers have announced they will call for an emergency meeting with the Supreme Court's president to look into the allegations. Moving on, Ecuador's Indigenous movement has finished drawing up its proposal for an alternative economic model as a response to the government's austerity package that triggered a national strike earlier this month. The proposal was drawn up by what the main indigenous organization, CONAIE, called a Parliament of the Peoples. For a week, more than 180 organizations met to debate and draw up the alternative plan. This came after talks with the government over a new decree to replace the one defeated by the protests failed to get off the ground.
This is
an alternative proposal to the neoliberal proposal of the government. It's a proposal that seeks to meet the big needs and problems of our country. So we want to present this proposal not just to the government, but to the whole country, to the people of Ecuador.
And staying in Ecuador, another person has died of injuries received in its protest earlier this month. Ecuador's main indigenous movement, CONAIE, announced on Twitter that Edgar Yucaylla, aged 32, had died in Chimborazo from a bullet wound in his head. It said he was another victim of police violence against the protesters over Decree 883. This death brings the total number killed to 11. Judges from the Peruvian Constitutional Court have voted unanimously to challenge President Martín Vizcarra's decision to dissolve Congress. Opposition lawmakers brought a legal case against President Vizcarra on Tuesday, contending that he broke the law when dissolving the legislature, triggering a constitutional crisis. Various groups have protested against the measure outside the Constitutional Court.
The competency claim for processing is allowed, and executive power will be notified so that the questions are answered in accordance with Vizcarra's right to a defense in the corresponding time.
Social movements in Bolivia are marching again to defend President Evo Morales' victory in the elections. Thousands of members of Campesino and other organizations streamed through La Paz as the government announced that an audit of the October 20th elections would begin on Thursday. The process will be carried out jointly between the government and the Organization of American States.
Today, the agreement between the Organization of American States and the plurinational state of Bolivia will be signed, an agreement that will allow for the complete audit of the October 20 general elections to start tomorrow, October 31st. We are absolutely sure that this process will develop with full transparency and that audit will finally certify the results from October 20 and the validity of our electoral process.
The opposition candidate who came second in the presidential election, Carlos Mesa, has turned down an invitation from the government to take part in the audit of the vote.
The audit agreed between the OAS and the candidate of the MAS, Evo Morales, did not listen to the country or to our conditions. This included dismissing the results of the vote count by the Supreme Electoral Tribunal and the need for the participation of civil society representatives in the process. We do not accept the audit on its current terms, which were agreed to unilaterally.
For 2 days, the opposition leader Carlos Mesa refused to reply to the government's invitation to join the audit. Instead, he demanded that the official results be ignored. Let's see how the standoff unfolded.
The invitation made to opposition leader Carlos Mesa to take part in an audit of the October 20th elections has gone unanswered, as he continues to call for mobilizations against the government.
Is the government ready to reject the results given by the Supreme Electoral Court and as such accept that they cannot claim victory until an audit takes place? Are they willing to accept this and accept the binding nature of such audit?
For its part, the government demands a clear response from Mesa, as they have opened all doors to find a solution.
From the moment we start an audit of the results, it's evident that said results are in danger of being modified. I think Mr. Mesa must give an honest answer. It seems he's waiting for more direction.
President Evo Morales has reiterated his position that if any irregularity is found in the results, he is willing to take part in a runoff vote.
The president has been clear. The result determined by auditors will be the new result. As soon as the OAS finishes within a reasonable period of time, it will be decided whether there's a runoff or not.
Meanwhile, supporters of President Morales have started to hold vigils near the Plaza Murillo as a direct response to the opposition's attempts to blockade the presidential palace.
Today, tomorrow, any day, we'll remain here to protect our President Evo.
We have come to defend Evo, to defend our votes. We will do anything that's necessary to make our choice be respected.
We have mobilized to defend our people's vote, especially from the indigenous and campesino communities.
But the opposition continues to reject the election results and is promoting mobilizations and roadblocks in a number of cities.
We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Our actions have an impact on the environment. It's our responsibility to change for the sake of our planet. Let's be part of this transition. Watch, preserve, and protect your Earth. Green Zone. Wednesdays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back to From the South. Jamaica's security minister told the parliament on Tuesday that the country has signed a new security arrangement with the United States for the interception of communications. So this comes after the Supreme Court found that the MO signed between the then government and the U.S. in 2006 was unsatisfactory and inadequate, which he said meant that the use of that MO was unlawful.
That last week, Wednesday, October 23, 2019, we signed with our U.S. partners a new agreement which will satisfy the legal requirements of our Constitution and will provide a strong basis for increased cooperation and operationalizing all arrangements in fighting transnational criminal activity out of Jamaica. We expect to conclude a similar agreement with Canada in short order. We operate under a different protocol with the United Kingdom, which is also being finalized.
Officials have begun discussing at the CARICOM Secretariat in preparation for a ministerial meeting of the Council for Trade and Economic Development, or COTED. The CARICOM Single Market and Economy will be high on the agenda when ministers meet in mid-November in Guyana. The region's non-communicable disease burden and other health threats will also come under scrutiny on November 19th at a joint COTED meeting. Trinidad and Tobago's Prime Minister has labeled his political opponent, Watson Duke, bold-faced for intending to contest elections while facing charges for rape and sedition. Duke, who leads the newly established Progressive Democratic Party, will contest local government elections on December 2nd and general elections constitutionally due by 2020.
When a person is on a criminal charge, that person is not supposed to be so bold-faced enough while being on a criminal charge to want to lead any part of this country. And I don't say that about Watson Duke alone. I say it about Glenn Ram in Mayaro, who is chairman of the Mayaro Corporation while on bail for bribery. And as a people, especially Tobago people, when a person is on a criminal charge, that person is not, for me, the best that the community could offer to lead your business. And I want to say something to Tobago young people, the handful of them who see Watson Duke as their savior. What are you saying to yourself and parents to your children, that this doesn't matter? Well, I beg to differ. It does matter. Character matters in leadership, and I make no apologies for that. Secondly, Mr. Duke is a tool of the very corrupt and dangerous UNC in Trinidad and Tobago.
The Nigerian Supreme Court has dismissed an appeal by an opposition candidate on the results of the February election. Opposition leader Atiku Abubakar had appealed to have President Muhammadu Buhari's victory nullified, but Chief Justice Tanko Mohammed said the court had found that the appeal had no merit. The judgment marked an end to an 8-month-long legal battle since February's polls, when Buhari won a second term with 56% of the vote.
This election and the judgment is not about President Buhari or His Excellency Alhaji Atiku Abubakar. It is about the future of our country and what we are going to bequeath to our children. preserve our country. Thank you very much.
South African police have used water cannons and tear gas to disperse hundreds of people gathered outside the office of the UN High Commission for Refugees in Cape Town. The protesters were holding a sit-in for 24 days over the safety of foreign nationals in the city. This overflowed into the mall that houses the UNHCR office, prompting the landlord to successfully apply for their eviction. For weeks, the demonstrators have asked to be evacuated from the country to find safety. In Somalia, flash floods have killed at least 5 people in the capital, Mogadishu. More than 180,000 have been forced to flee their homes due to the flooding. Rescue teams are continuing to search for bodies following reports of more missing couples. Meanwhile, on Monday, another 10 people died when a rescue boat capsized in the central town of Beledweyne. Egypt's Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry says his country is willing to participate in internationally mediated talks with Ethiopia over a dam the latter is constructing on the Nile River. Shoukry told visiting German Foreign Minister Heiko Maas that Cairo is committed to finding an amicable solution to the dispute with Addis Ababa. The two nations have been at loggerheads for more than a decade over the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. Egypt says the project, located near Ethiopia's border with Sudan, will drastically reduce the flow of the Nile, on which it depends for around 90% of its water supply. Ethiopia, on the other hand, insists that it needs the dam to generate electricity to meet its energy needs.
Egypt, Sudan and Ethiopia will meet in the United States on 6 November in attendance of representatives of the U.S. administration to break the deadlock in the ongoing negotiations regarding the Renaissance Dam.
We'll be right back. Stay with us.
A review of the world news that investigates, incites analysis and induces criticism, because every event has a context.
Pusimos el punto en I.
Dot in the I. Saturdays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back to From the South. Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez's visit to Barcelona has been met with protests from Catalan pro-independence campaigners. Hundreds of Catalan activists gathered near Barcelona to protest against the visit of Pedro Sanchez, who was due to speak at the pre-campaign event. Demonstrators booed Sanchez and waved banners denouncing the conviction of Catalan leaders. Spain's top court handed down 12-year sentences to 9 Catalan leaders earlier this month for organizing a referendum and a short-lived declaration of independence back in 2017.
Go back to common sense, back to CENI, Catalan common sense, and start working together again, so that this whole situation is just a dark period and we can start building a better Catalonia together.
5 people have been killed by militants in India-occupied Kashmir as a group of far-right EU lawmakers began their visit to the region. They're the first foreign delegation to visit since India's revoked Kashmir's autonomy in August. Police say the 5 victims were construction workers from eastern India. The latest killings followed a day of violent clashes across Kashmir, triggered by the arrival of the EU delegation, which many locals see as an attempt by India to whitewash injustices committed against Kashmiri people. Meanwhile, India accuses Pakistan of backing militants who have been waging a decades-old insurgency against Indians' rule in the region. As the first report of the Grenfell Tower fire is released, survivors who lost family members have blamed the London Fire Brigade for telling residents to stay indoors when the blaze took hold. This as the report said a highly combustible cladding fixed to the 24-story block was the principal reason the 2017 fire spread so quickly. The report also accused the London Fire Brigade of systematic failings in advising the residents to stay in their flats rather than to escape.
They just gave up too early on the victims. The building fire went out of its own accord. It wasn't put off by London Fire Brigade. The reason it went out because there was nothing else left to burn. They allowed the bodies of the loved ones to just cremate.
On the night, we knew and we saw how you failed, and you should have put the fire out when you should have, but knowing that you couldn't tackle a fire that was bigger than you can imagine and harder to put it out, you should have implemented a rescue mission a lot earlier.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan says joint patrols with Russian forces will start in Syria on Friday. The announcement comes a day after a deadline expired for the withdrawal of Syrian Kurdish fighters.
Russia told us that 34,000 terrorists left Tel Rifat, Manbij and the east of the Euphrates with 3,260 heavy weapons and moved out of the 30-kilometer strip. Even though the information in our hands suggests this has not been a success in a full sense, we will give our response to them after our field assessments. We will begin joint work in the field with Russians on Friday. We will begin patrols, and if we see that members of the terrorist organization have not been moved out of the 30-kilometer area, or if attacks continue no matter from where, we reserve our right to carry out our own operations.
Over the weekend, the President of the United States announced that the leader of ISIS, Abu Bakr al Baghdadi, had been killed in Syria's Idlib province. But the announcement has been met with skepticism by Syrian authorities and a number of other parties.
Abu Bakr al Baghdadi is dead.
Over the weekend, President Trump assured that the leader of ISIS blew himself up with a suicide vest when he was cornered in his hideout in Idlib. However, while Ankara and Baghdad say they had a main role in the operation, the Russian Ministry of Defense has called its reliability into question.
We believe that Trump is trying to involve those countries into an endless fight against Al-Qaeda and Daesh, since the armed groups will try to retaliate against Iraq and Turkey countries for al-Baghdadi's death if he was truly killed, since there's no evidence that proves it so far.
Al-Baghdadi's death was announced right when Trump seeks victories to embellish his own image and prove he has been successful in fighting terrorism. But his attempts will fail because his own policies and Zionist leanings prove this is his own creation.
The UK, France, Turkey and NATO congratulated the alleged operation against al-Baghdadi and said his death marks a crucial turning point in the fight against terrorism. But experts agree with Iran in saying that all Washington did was eliminate their own creation, and that the terrorist plans will not be affected.
These organizations always resurface with different names, as Daesh, al-Nusra, and Yaiz al-Fateh are nothing more than names that substituted others. There's a new organization under the name the White Flags, and they all operate for the service of the United States and their colonialist projects that threaten stability in the region.
While the Syrian government has remained mum about al-Baghdadi's alleged death, they've criticized the White House for continuing their alleged war on terrorism to intervene on Syrian land. They also said that U.S. troops that withdrew to Iraq have once again invaded areas that are rich in oil in the northeast of the country to allegedly protect this land from ISIS.
Nepali climber Nirmal Purja has shattered the speed record for summiting the world's 14 highest mountains by completing the feat in just over 6 months. Having served previously in the British Army, the 30-year-old mountaineer completed his project possible on October 28th when he successfully climbed the Shishapangma mountain in China. Purja first drew worldwide attention to his attempt back in May when he snapped a photo of a long line of climbers near the summit of Mount Everest, where 11 people died due to adverse conditions during that climbing season. The previous record holder finished the challenge in just under 8 years.
You know, there was no greed in this project. There was no selfishness in this project. The project was never about the race. It was truly about the human endeavor and also to the justice for the Nepalese climber.
And with that story, we've come to the end of this news brief. These and other stories, as always, find them on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also join us on social media. We are on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Thank you for watching.
Donc l'événement est déjà créé au niveau du Nigeria. On ne peut pas aller. La route est bloquée par des Boko Haram.